Soaked to the core and exhausted, Dew reached for the door handle with his free hand. The woman at the counter curiously eyed the 3 potential customers who just entered. "What can I do for you?" Another man standing before indignantly gestured because of being replaced by the newcomers. "2 rooms, that's all we need," Aaron explained, stepping forward and leaning on the counter with both of his hands. The woman shrank back, but her expression wasn't that of intimidation and more of admiration. "2 beds in one and a single in the other," she guessed, and after a smiling nod from the ex-general, she said, "We can do that." Then she turned towards the other man by the counter and sweetly announced, "Sorry, now we're really out of space." Dew watched with mild disturbance as the man slammed his fist on the counter, shouted, "For God's sake," and stomped out of the building. "The 3 of you must have been traveling for a while and are exhausted now," she chirped, ignoring the anger of the past customer. "We sure are," Aaron agreed, a weird smirk on his face. Spotting a chair on the wall to the right, Dew went to place what occupied his other arm down. Avery gratefully sank down on the chair while the other shook his arm to first notice that it had gone mostly numb. Supporting a person for over an hour was hard. Carrying most of their stuff and continuing to walk was even harder, making him want to sit down as well, but there were 2 more people in the room, which would see it as weird if he sat down on the ground. "How are you feeling?" Dew inquired almost as quietly as a whisper. "Could be better. I think I'm bleeding from the inside, but that's been the case for the past 2 days. Why didn't you tell us? We could have slowed down because we're almost going as fast as you predicted before we started," he scolded the hybrid. "I wanted to walk as long as I could and it'll be better tomorrow, trust me. Sorry for the trouble though." The Merling sighed, annoyed at his partner's stubbornness and his own exhaustion from the past 11 days. "Where do you come from and where are you traveling to? You surely have a lot of luggage on you." The woman kept chatting, and it was obvious she wanted to keep it up for a while. By the way, she leaned her head onto her arm while Aaron backed off just a little to give her space. "Visiting family, siblings to be precise. We're from the castle. I used to be a real knight, you know." "Oh, how fascinating. And all of you were in the army?" Aaron immediately conquered even the little rest of the woman's attention. "Only me and my black-haired acquaintance over there, a real dragon hybrid by the way, but he was stabbed badly and can't work any longer. The grey one over there is just a servant while I am a retired general because I want to see the world," he introduced them. Avery rolled his eyes. She gasped, "Then you must know a lot about the life high up. Wait, what kind of rooms are you looking for? We won't reach up to the stanzas of the castle, but—" "The 2 of us would just have a plain room as far away from him as possible, thank you. If that can't be arranged, just keep the noise down, please," Avery snarled from the wall. Dew choked. "That was bold." "That was necessary," Avery corrected and leaned the cane in the corner, where there was a space just large enough in between the bed and wall for it to fit. "You don't know how annoying it can be with a thin wall like the Holiday Manor. Telling myself that it isn't my problem, he can't get it up fast enough, doesn't help it either." Dew frowned while he desperately tried to banish any kind of picture from his mind. "Isn't doing that outside of marriage illegal?" he wondered out loud. "Not if you're the ones enacting the law, apparently." Dew had never been a fan of the idea of one-night stands. To him it was rather disturbing, which he blamed on his past experiences. Even less, though, did he understand Aaron for doing so. And so shortly after his betrothed died, does he not grieve? "Makes it sound like you believe either of them took it very tightly with the promise behind the marriage." "They didn't," Avery chattered while the other wasn't sure whether the hybrid looked down upon the mindset or not. He sat down on a bed and gave Dew back his small luggage, who then went over to his own after having placed everything else on the 1-meter space between the beds. A singular tiny window was in the middle of the wall. Sitting down cross-legged, he freed his diary from the bag together with the pen. "Your time with them sounds disturbing," he commented. "Right? Sue left the room saying something like, 'I have night duty,' like sure you have put a sign in your general's bed. If he didn't have his own, they probably even wouldn't have bothered staying out of a group room. It's not like they minded when I told them to keep quiet because I wanted to sleep. Generally, they would make great parents because they care a lot about what happens to the people around them. On the other hand, there's this. At least it's consensual." Avery sank against the wall with his arms crossed over his chest. After a moment of silently staring around, he added, I wonder how they would have felt if I pulled out the guy's fingernails right next door. Why not go for theirs directly? Would ruin the experience, Dew suggested after processing the scenario. Avery raised his eyebrows. What? The Merling wanted to know, and put his diary to the side. Nothing, I just didn't expect that. I thought you'd just nod or something. I don't know, just thought it would be effective and maybe entertaining, he responded, to which the other one said with a smirk, Sounds more like something I would say to comrades. Dew slightly smiled back, even though he didn't know why. According to your reaction, I want to assume that you wouldn't replace me if I were to spontaneously combust, Avery then continued, and it almost offended Dew that he had to say, Of course I wouldn't. What did you think of me before? The other shrugged with a played eye roll. Forgive me, my dearest companion, I'm insecure, he replied. He wasn't sure when exactly during the conversation it happened, but he ended up sitting next to the hybrid on the bed and used the last page of his diary to play a game. One person drew, the other tried to guess what was depicted. He had been aware from the start that he would be the one having an easy time guessing, because as long as Avery had seen it, he could accurately depict it, even if it took him some time to do so. The opposite was the case the other way around. Is it a cat? No, it has 2 legs, Dew corrected and pointed at the 2 stubbles he drew. Then what's this? The feathers. So it's supposed to be a bird. Avery looked up at him as if concerned. Sometimes something with wings can react more like a cat. He gestured towards the horns and the other one chuckled shortly. A peacock. Think simpler, it's a common bird. A rooster? Dew rolled the pencil over to his competitor and declared, Correct. I counted and it took me 6 questions to learn that this was an animal, he complained, and Dew considered giving the other a nudge, but remembered the rules. But you did, so it's a skill issue. Yeah, on your side, Avery argued while picking up the pen. How do you even know what a peacock is? When it comes to cooking specialities, you're the one lacking, Dew teased. You forget you talk much and often, and you always said you liked their tail feathers, he explained, already having begun to draw. Dew's eyes followed the strokes. That's easy, it's a pig. The one with the pen nodded. We know many of those, the Merlin continued, to which the other grumbled. And one of them is having the highlight of his week right now. It took Dew a moment to realize that Avery wasn't talking about Jonah. You don't think well about having several partners, don't you? I genuinely don't care what others prefer for their own lives as long as it's consensual for all parties involved. It would be nothing for me, that's all I can say. I just agree with you that it's so early that it makes it seem like he never even cared about Sue. That bothers me. What about yourself? Me? He couldn't quite understand why the hybrid directed the question towards him, as a person who hadn't even gotten close enough to someone to be called romantically involved, except the marriage he was in, of course. Yes, you. But why? Just look at me. If you ask me, he began, turning the book to face him, I could ask the same. Dew admitted. Fair enough. So far, I don't think it would be something for me, but I have a hypothetical question. If I were to want that, what would your response be? Avery lifted his eyebrows. Well, he muttered while avoiding eye contact with Dew, about a month and a bit ago I would have told myself I shouldn't care. It would have meant I was replaceable, which would have eradicated my reason to exist. Right now I think differently. I couldn't imagine not being enough as a partner, meaning I'd simply leave, but if you were to choose differently, I'd be okay with that. Not incredibly happy, but probably glad for you, because you deserve someone who can love you back. Dew took the pen and started scribbling, immediately knowing how terrible his depiction of what he wanted to deliver would look like, even when finished. Turning a page towards the other one, he waited for him to decipher the drawing. A pair of scissors? Avery guessed confusedly. Dew shook his head. Flowers? Again did he shake his head. How about... The hybrid squinted. Roots? A spider? Any other kind of insects? A hairy caterpillar? Dew began to frown. How terrible was the sketch for it to be compared to a hairy caterpillar? He ended up sighing after very small guessing attempts and revealed, "It's supposed to be a hug. I can't put my thoughts into words right now." Avery cocked his head while staring forth and back between Dew's face and the drawing, ending up saying, "That's sweet. It's just that it kinda looks like a bundle of hair thrown up by a cat. You know I can't really give you that kind of affection, but you know what you should definitely do for comfort." He reached out for the bag on the ground and pulled it closer before getting out an object wrapped in a clean tissue. Then he passed it to Dew. "The night barely began, and if you sleep now, you'll wake up earlier than necessary. Take your time and eat a little." Contrary to the first half of the prediction, it really left him being up to the time he usually got ready to get to work. Over the past 9 days it had been the case that he automatically woke up, but it depended on the distance and the way the road was shaped, if he overslept in the sense of kitchen work or not. Roads leading upwards or rocky paths were more exhausting than those who were even in all aspects, or at least one. The length of the daily trip was a completely different story, as well as the physical state of each of the 3 people traveling. Aaron had recovered from Avery's lesson after one night, but Avery had clearly gotten weaker by the day while Dew regained his foothold. Waking up, Dew found the outside to be a soft dark shade of greyish-blue. The sun hadn't gotten to rise yet. His bones tired, but mind wide awake after dreams which vanished like the smoke of a candle, he turned from facing the wall to his back and stretched his limbs out. Immediately he sunk back together and pulled the blanket into the right position. It had been a surprisingly good sleep compared to all the past times they had stayed at an inn. No loud neighbors, average and mostly clean beds, and a mild temperature had him feel almost welcome at the place, but the luxury would definitely come with the price, and even though his savings had been plenty, he began to shrink to a worryingly small amount. "Good morning," someone muttered hoarsely from the other bed. When he turned his head, Dew could make out the 2 half-open eyes staring at him. "Shouldn't you still be asleep?" the Merling asked blankly. "I fell asleep earlier than you did. Let me guess. You stayed up at least an hour longer than me." "Probably," Dew admitted. Avery stretched his arms forward as far as he could, and his wing opened to the side, crossing the distance between the beds. It felt almost strange seeing the other person not lie on his side, but on his chest, with the head buried in his arms. The point of the black extra limb poked Dew into the side, causing both of them to flinch. Before Avery could fold it back up again, Dew's hand had already seized it while rolling to the side to easily face it. "What's that going to be when you're done?" the hybrid asked in alert, eyeing as the other gently tugged on the limb. He felt the hard surface of the finger part and the contrast to the leathery skin. How could something like this tear? "I wondered," he began, looking at his right hand, "how it feels to have an entire body part missing. I just sometimes feel pain where I should have a ring finger, but before Patrick died, he claimed it constantly hurt." Avery shuffled a little further to the edge of his own bed, and Dew could touch even more of the wing while the hybrid explained. "For me it's somewhat of a constant awareness. Yes, it hurts most of the time, so I can't sleep on the empty side." "And is it still sensitive to the touch? The scar?" "Not specifically. That healed off well," he replied. "Can I see it?" Dew requested. He sat on the head side of the bed while Avery was obediently sitting cross-legged in front of him in his blouse and shorts. When Dew touched the area where he could see the reddish long mark, he felt the way the hybrid tried to suppress a trembling. The skin felt similar to the texture of the fingers of the wing and the horns, but blended in with the rest of the smooth scales. The color was almost dark gray, where the joint of the wing used to be connected to his back. "Why did they remove it? Couldn't it be healed?" Avery sighed. "They would have kept it if it were possible. You're lucky you didn't get to see the mess of broken bones and torn flesh that was, and I almost fainted again after waking up in that tent and taking down the guy who tried to take both of them off." "I see." His attention was caught by a new scar further up, which went straight from one shoulder blade up to the opposite area between shoulder and neck. "And this is where Jonah struck you first?" Avery nodded. "With a sword?" Dew continued to ask. "A claymore. He only lost one of his arms about 20 minutes after and switched to a sword. Him surviving was sheer luck." "And you can currently beat him as well, can you?" A moment of silence. "I gave Aaron my weapon for a reason," he responded. Dew's hands, which had left his partner's back, dug themselves into his own trousers. "And if he fails?" "The outcome depends on my physical state, and if you can defend yourself as well, which I believe you can," Avery responded with false confidence. "It won't go well," the Merlin concluded. "If he catches up, we're totally fucked," he agreed plainly. Dew's head slumped forward while a miserable dark whine came out of his mouth. The hybrid chuckled bitterly and turned around. "If he does catch up, if Aaron can defend us, and if I'm taken down, I have a request for you." Avery spoke calmly, and Dew felt his cold fingers on her wrist. "Just run. Get away as far as possible and hide. Abandon the idea of finding my brother, because the risk is too high for you not to find it, and therefore not safe. All Jonah will do to me is kill me. Your fate would look worse than that." "Avery," Dew whispered, his head running hot with a phantom ringing in his ears, "right now I'd like a hug." For his taste, they waited way too long for the third person to arrive. Standing outside the building in the cold was bad enough, but the constant feeling of ice on his back made it worse. The hood pulled into his face, and the scarf he had gifted Avery covering his lower half of the face should have been enough to hide his strange appearance. Still, he felt bad for practically having stolen the piece of cloth from his partner, even though he had offered it to him after remembering he had it on him. Avery had justified the gesture by saying Dew was the one needing it more than him because he couldn't feel the cold anymore, and the cape covered most of his body, which meant his waist, around which he had worn it before underneath layers of clothes, could not be seen well. Avery still leaned onto the cane to support himself, but he was doing better than the evening before, and after everything Dew was impressed by how unfazed his partner was capable of moving. When Aaron finally stepped out of the building, Dew sighed a breath of both relief and annoyance. "What took you so long?" Avery snarled as a greeting. "Overslept." The glance the dragon hybrid threw towards him was unforgiving, but the man shrugged. "What, do I not deserve a slightly longer break after years and years of service?" "You could have just slept earlier, but no," the other complained loudly and turned around on the spot towards where they had come from yesterday. Dew was immediately by his side, watching the environment made of several loose houses, which almost merged into the hill and forest. Though the anxiety he had felt earlier this morning had gone down, a little part of him still believed there to be a shadowy figure behind every corner. His hand was entangled with that of his partner, the skin just as cold as before, but more alive than he felt himself. The comfort he could find in the simple touch made him believe in safety. Perhaps it was the same for the other person. Maybe he, too, felt comforted by the way they were connected, sharing a hug, holding the other as if to shield them. It reminded Dew of the time before everything in the castle had gone downhill for him, before the first poison attack on the king, before he had to fear for his life. A simple hug had been all he needed for comfort when a new stream of tasks and situations threatened to overwhelm him. He didn't need the other to be a romantic partner. A friend was enough, if not more than he sometimes needed. Soon they were submerged in the depths of the forest. The thin needles of the trees towering around their path from all sides softened the ground they walked on. It followed the route of a tiny river, not much broader than a meter at most, which flowed into the opposite direction they were walking in. Bridges lacking railings and sometimes even several planks crossed the small stream whenever the ever-changing narrow terrain demanded it to. Dew viewed the slight valley to be enclosing, but the splattering of the water kept him company while reminding him that there was a path where the water must have come through. Secretly he wished it to be late spring, where the birds would fill the trees and chirping and singing, and the insects would fly lively. It wouldn't be as quiet, only the cracking of old wood rustling and their own footsteps interrupting it. When the animals could live without interruption, so could he. If they were living, there was no danger nearby, but without them he never knew. All he could trust was his vision directed to what was lying before him, and the steady step and casual small talk he could hear from behind his back. "Do you regret leaving your position behind?" Du heard his partner ask while they were climbing the path upwards. "I miss my pay and my good food and chamber, but the work was tiring. So many papers and so much physical work, all for one person. All I have left of this now is the physical exhaustion," he replied. "And how about you?" "What should I miss? My friends are long gone, so are my contract and my health. There's nothing to enjoy about mass murder or working as a low-paid prostitute. All I want is by my side and before me." "You have a questionable focus on what you need. Didn't the time in the army teach you not to base your happiness on nothing more than other people?" Aaron responded as if to scold the former knight. "You're probably right, but I don't have enough time to figure out what else to live for." They arrived at a point where the stream transformed into a tiny waterfall. At its beginning, the area became wider and so did the path. Finally, the constant increase in height was diminished, which acted as a relief for Du's tired legs. "You currently romanticize dying peacefully after having reunited with your brother, don't you?" Aaron guessed. The man had fallen behind a little, no wonder by all of the items he had burdened himself to carry. Avery shrugged without looking. "Perchance I do. It does sound lovelier than being burned on a pile of other corpses who die due to the strategic incompetence of the higher-ups, doesn't it?" "Since we met again in the dining room of the Queen, you're so rude to me," the man commented amusedly, dodging Avery's indirect complaint. "Give me one valid reason why I owe you my respect when you barely even respect my judgment," he shot back, to which Aaron admitted. "I did, I just didn't listen to it, which, I must confess, was a mistake once or twice. It most likely cost your fiancée her life and me my sanity." "It was her own decision to go after that man. I just trusted her enough to succeed, and she did," Aaron argued more fiercely. Du's eyes wandered off to the side to get a closer look at clusters of mushrooms which grew all over the valley side. Even though entertained by the little creatures, he couldn't overhear the argument which developed to his side and behind him. He heard Avery say, "I told the two of you there were like 2 enemy units around and that she should at least take 2 people with her." "We didn't have that many people to spare. We were in a fight. Did you already forget?" "We could have retreated to a point where we were out of the shooter's range and have the enemy follow out of their backup position, and you decided to run." The discussion went on, growing more personal by the second, so he zoned out. Du couldn't add to the conversation because he hadn't been on the battlefield, and even if he could, he wouldn't want to. His mind became entertained with the moss growing in spiky and wool-like shapes. His smell picked up the scent of distant rain, and there was a mild fog over his gaze, which covered the midday sun and sucked the vibrant colors out of the environment, which made him feel both cold and calm. Out of nowhere he picked up the person beside him, scolding, "Fine, if you don't return in 5 minutes, we'll wait for you, but I wouldn't like to lose much time because I already lose feeling in my feet." Looking behind, Du saw Aaron salute amusedly, as if to say, "I understand that," and retreat into the thicket. "Again? How much did that guy drink?" he commented. "Too much, apparently." Avery kept on staring forward while Du became interested in a different aspect of the surroundings. Those eyes. Soon the hybrid noticed that the Merling was staring at him and loosened his own gaze from the path ahead. "What is it?" he inquired. "I don't know, it's just weird seeing you with a less unsettling eye color." "It's that big of a difference, huh?" "Yeah." Du turned his head down. "And that's your original color? No more changes to brown or something? You have hints of that near the center." "Hopefully," Avery replied. Du cocked his head, wondering out loud, "Dislike the color or what?" "Personally, not really. I just don't want to look like a smaller version of my mother, that's all. My hope is that this is also just part of the alterations he subjected my brothers and my appearance to." She didn't want us to know, but I saw my brother's eyes when they used to be a very dark brown. Maybe his skin was even a tad lighter, but who can tell with babies? I can't. How far is that the case for me? I can't tell. The Merling whistled. Sounds like that woman was obsessed. The other one chuckled. Yes, she definitely was. It were more than 5 minutes later until they noticed he did not catch up. Around the next turn they stopped. Avery sat down on a fallen tree which posed an obstacle on their path. He closed his eyes, breathing heavily even though he didn't have to. Dew joined him after a moment of wandering forth and back without a goal in mind. Are you growing exhausted again? He wanted to know, leaning his head against the other one's shoulder, who then slung the entire arm around his upper body. Suddenly the rules didn't seem to exist anymore, broken with that hug. Always been. If we went in the middle of nowhere, I'd curl up under a tree and sleep an hour or two. Why didn't you just do that in the morning? You didn't have to stand up and do things, the Merling responded. He flinched as Avery's freezing fingers traveled under the scarf and touched the light scar, which was left from Dew threatening to end himself before Jonah. That's the thing. I tried, but couldn't because I was well rested for the moment. Can you sleep through a week and miss out on all of it the next one? Probably not, he argued, bending towards Dew to nudge his head against the Merling's. The person on the receiving end could once again smell the iron from his partner's breath mixed with the sour-sweet scent. You're bleeding on the inside, he noted. Since I woke up after the battle, yes, I barely taste it anymore, only when I'm dizzy or emotional. I hope you don't mind too much. You're the one hanging on by a thread, not me. Now, where's that guy? Should we worry? Dew whispered and looked towards the path behind them, but the turn swallowed up everything after just a few meters. Let's give it another minute or so. The hybrid stood up and positioned himself in the middle of the path. Dew caught the gesture which commanded him to stay behind just in case, so he turned and got to the other side of the tree, their items right beside him. He listened. The river was still sputtering next to him. The leftover leaves were being pushed around by a cold breeze which traveled through the valley. Looking up at the sky, Dew could clearly see the dark rain clouds approaching. Avery's wing twitched under the dark cape. Leave, he blankly said. Dew didn't move. Instead, he stared at his partner in confusion. Grab nothing more than your bag and continue on. I'll catch up with you in 20 minutes. If I don't, run. A tingling started in the back of the Merling's head. The rules were back. As if dazed, he turned to face away from the hybrid and began walking forward, slowly and heavily. With every step, a little bit of determination returned to his senses of the situation, due to which his pace quickened to a point where he couldn't clearly decipher the different rocks underneath his feet. He followed the river. It went further upwards. Why was he following it? A few more fallen trees blocked his path. He climbed over them, barely stopping for even a moment. Why did he leave his partner behind? His hand tightened around the strap of his bag. To his side was an opening where he could finally see into the endless lands made of hills and tiny clusters of houses in the dens created. A tower or two peeked out in between the countless treetops. It was a magnificent view, and the shreds of clouds resting here and there. Dew kept on going. Was he in danger? Why the thought didn't cross his mind earlier he couldn't explain to himself, but it was obvious. Something had most likely happened, and Avery wanted to protect Dew from it. From him, most likely. All of a sudden Dew stopped and turned around on the spot. He couldn't see his partner anymore. Obviously he couldn't. He had been walking for about an hour straight, and he couldn't hear anything. Even the river had disappeared into nowhere long ago. He was truly alone. He had nothing except his little bag, and no one except himself, which wasn't much. Going back was an idea he immediately abandoned, so there was only one more option. Continuing to go forward, find an unexpected road fork and take it, arrive at the village and vanish from the other one's radar. Without Avery he couldn't easily be found. After resting he could continue on, further and further away from the original route, maybe set over to Haven if possible. Just be gone, just be free. His vision grew blurry, his throat ran dry while his cheeks became hot and wet. But he could continue. He didn't need his full vision to know where to step. He didn't need a map to know where he was, because it didn't matter. He didn't need a partner by his side for his body to continue walking. But his mind did. His hand felt empty, his back unprotected. Now he was the haunted one, because Avery was most likely already dead. Touching his neck, he felt the pain from the cut, which felt as if it had opened up again, and the pain kept him company as he pinched deeper into his own flesh, while feeling the scarring flesh from the knife he still carried with him. He could end it immediately. Why should he not? What did he have to live for exactly? Why did he run if he could rest? It would only be a matter of time until his partner would die, if he hadn't already. They could be together. Wherever it was, it couldn't be worse than here. Dew felt the scar. He held the tip of the blade against it. How easy would everything be if he would just press down. He already had the stinging there, where a tiny stream of blood began to run down his neck again. If there was no wing to protect him, there was his blood which kept him safe. He could imagine his dead body in the middle of the road, soaked in red where Jonah would find it. The boar would find his body and could do nothing to change a mind which had long since disappeared. In his mind and in his senses the metal sunk into him. A deep sound escaped his torso. The world was black. He felt the ground under his feet until he collapsed, being thrown to the hard surface and falling, keeping on falling. The noise was gone. His arm slumped down, and with it did the knife leave his neck. It was his head which first indicated to him that he had hit the ground. He could taste the dirt, smell the wet ground, and feel how drop by drop landed on his head. He wasn't dead. Dew hadn't done it. His vision returned, and he looked at the white surface of a lake. Small waves quickly lost themselves with every new raindrop disturbing the body of water. The circles of wet took Dew's blurry gaze into their middle. He could see nothing else but the play of water. He couldn't move. He was held down. He couldn't feel the throbbing pain of his head and torso, only how his hair was getting soaked. Not even the bloodstream on his neck was important. It was calm, it was fascinating, it was peaceful. He wanted to stay. But the dizziness only lasted for so long. The aching of the fall crept back into his brain, which had blocked out every uncomfortable sensation before, and he wanted to hold his neck by opening his fingers and guide his hand to the right spot. He tried. He couldn't move. Nothing could move. A weight was holding him down, and he was too weak to even lift a finger. So he stayed. He stayed for a long time, watched the sky turn black while his limbs went numb and his eyes started freezing. Dew didn't know when it happened, but he must have fallen asleep, because he woke up the next morning with the weapon still next to his hand, still at the lake which he hadn't ventured to, and still unable to move. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be on a path covered with needles from the tall trees, not a ground made of plain dirt, rocks and sand mixed with dead grass. He was supposed to be surrounded by those tall trees on one side and view the majestic sight of the forest of Bota, not the seemingly endless lake. He was supposed to be capable of moving. He didn't do it. He didn't push down and end it. He wasn't currently dying. Dew slammed his palm into the ground to push himself from his position on his belly to be on his back. And it worked. The weight fell off, and suddenly Dew could sit up again and stretch his hands, shake his legs to free them from the numbness and straighten his back. Looking around, he first saw the area to the other side, which still had the same type of tree, but they were 10 meters away from him. To one side of the lake was a massive cliff, a yellowish rock looking as if it had been cut off vertically. A small stretch of land could be seen somewhere near the horizon of the lake, but thick white prevented him from seeing more. Lastly, Dew's eyes went to his side. His hands reached out, weak and almost trembling, grabbing hold of the frail thing next to him, taking it into his arms and holding it like a treasure which was about to decay and become one with the dirt. The pink fluid smeared over his dirty and soaked clothes. His arms tightened around the empty bag where only one stump of black was left. And he cried into the grey hair which he buried his face in, because this thing brought him to safety, giving up itself for someone who didn't even want to live.